Hello dear students, welcome to the fourth and last part of the video series on environmental and natural resources. In this video we are going to talk about India's view on the environmental struggle, the environmental movements and the condition and impact of environmental degradation on indigenous populations all over the world. So, a review of the implementation of the agreements of the Earth Summit that happened in Rio de Janeiro was undertaken by India in 1997. And what did we find? We find that there had been no meaningful progress with respect to transfer of new and additional financial resources. So, uh, money and like funds were not given and environmentally sound technology on concessional terms to developing nations. So, like I had discussed in the beginning, that if the developed countries want developing countries to take a serious part in the environmental issue, then the developed countries need to provide additional funds to these developing countries and also latest technology so these developing countries can move away from using conventional sources of energy. So this has not taken place. So if you do not help these developing countries in tackling the problem of environmental degradation, then it's very unfair to ask for their cooperation also. Because if you cannot help them, then how can you expect them to deal with that issue? Now, India is also of the view that the SAARC countries should adopt a common position on major global environmental issue so that the region's voice carries greater weight. So India believes that the countries of SAARC and most of these countries of SAARC are actually uh, developing countries. So all these developing countries can come together and then they can raise their voice against this unfair practice by the developed countries. Because if a country like India or China alone raises their voice, then they might be sidelined. So that is India's view on taking the environmental struggle forward. Now, environmental movements. So, environmental movements are a result of people's action and, like it says, most significant response to this challenge. By this challenge, I mean the environmental challenge have come from not from the governments but rather from groups of environmentally conscious volunteers. So the governments have not done much in the environmental struggle. Like in India, you can also see that the government is trying to clean up rivers, but they are not able to do much. But you might hear stories about some individuals or a group of individuals who have cleaned the seashore in Mumbai or who have cleaned the Yamuna River, some parts of the Yamuna River. They go to beaches and clean the beaches. They have you might have read stories about one single family. They have reforested an entire barren land. So individuals are doing much, and these volunteers also, like, they're coming together, forming their NGOs, and they are working on the environmental issue. The governments are not able to do much because of their internal politics, the blame game. So, like, if one government body wants to do something, the other government body will try to stop it. Like, there is this internal politics, all that. Now, these environmental movements are amongst the most vibrant, diverse, and powerful social movements across the globe today. So, like, you can see Greta Thunberg itself, like, she is leading a uh, environmental movement. So it's so diverse. You know, this small school girl, she is leading the environmental struggle, and it's a very diverse struggle. So people from all over the world, Asia, Africa, India, all of us come together, America, and then all these people lead this environmental movement. And it's social movement because people come together based on their social identities. It's not because they belong to a certain political party or because they are from the same economic group, but because they all feel that we all belong to this earth. This feeling of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, all world is a family, is very much visible in this environmental movement. Now, these movements raise new ideas and long term visions of what we should do and what we should not do our individual and collective lives. So these movements are not just to protest, but they raise ideas and long-term visions also. So they provide some kind of alternative, and they inform us of what should we do and not do in our individual and also collective lives. So as a person, I might not be using plastics. I'll be using jute bags, paper bags, everything. But I'm okay with people doing deforestation, or if I'm okay with consuming products which are raised in an unsustainable way. So right now you might have heard about this eco-friendly fashion going on. So these are clothes which are made from reused or recycled material, or jeans which is manufactured using environmental friendly practices. So that is a mode of collective living. Everybody who is living, who is dependent on us and who we are dependent on, all of us are living in a sustainable and eco-friendly manner. So it does not just mean that I will not use plastics. I will also make sure that my neighborhood people know about the harms of using plastic, and I will appeal to them not to use. Of course, I cannot force anybody. I will make sure that my locality does not participate in any kind of wasteful practices. So that is what we can do. In school also we have this stationery policy. We make sure that in our collective lives also we do not consume too many stationery unnecessarily. We should not consume. So mindful consumption is what I'm talking about now. But the problem, one of the failures of environmental movements is that forest clearing in the third world continues at an alarming rate, despite 3 decades of environmental activism. So of course, like in India, we were able to tackle this problem a little bit with the Chipko movement that started in Uttarakhand, and we were able to stop this menace of deforestation. But of course, in other areas of India, deforestation continues. These big corporations, in order to set up their factories and industries, they deforest an area and they set up their factories. Farmers try to clear the forest and use them as farmland, and this is rampant in all over the third world. So China, India, all these third world developing countries, Brazil, the same practice happens. While you go to America and Europe, you will see that they have preserved certain parts of their uh, no, environment, their forests. So in America you can think of going for a hike or going for a nature trail, but in India we cannot. We have these concrete jungles and nothing else. So we need to work on that also. No struggles for environment. So the mineral industry, the mining industry is one of the most powerful forms of industry on the planet, and it is criticized for all these things: for the extraction of earth minerals, for the use of chemicals in this extraction, for the pollution of waterways and land, its clearance of native vegetation, and its displacement of communities. So whenever you start a mine, you extract a lot of minerals from the earth. So again you are over exploiting natural resources. Again you will use a lot of chemicals to extract these minerals. That leads to these chemicals getting released in the water and land, and polluting that water and land elements. Also, if you want to set up a mine, you have to deforest the area around it, so you can set up your plant in a proper manner. So again, that leads to loss of native vegetation, and of course, if there are people living there already, then you will displace those communities if you want to set up a mine. That's why in India you can see there is a lot of protests against these mines. Also, they in recently in Andhra we had this chemical factory leak. So again, these are very dangerous industries, and when they are in close proximity of the population, then they become more dangerous. Now, so there is also another group of environmental movements. Those are involved in struggles against mega dams. So mega dams are like huge dams which are multi-purpose. So they are not just for the generation of electricity, but they are also for diverting the water of the river in a particular way. So like canals, they are used for irrigation. They are used for supplying fresh water. So like they have multi-purpose, but they are so big that they lead to a lot of a huge area getting submerged and a huge population getting displaced. So that is why the environmental movements are against such mega dams. Now, there are pro river movements for more sustainable and equitable management of river system and values. So NBA, that is Narmada Bachao Andolan in India, is one of those examples of such environmental movements. So it was also against a mega dam, that is the Sardar Sarovar project. So these environmental movements are trying to conserve rivers because we are playing with the natural course and stream of rivers to generate our own profits. Now there is also a resource geopolitics. So it's all about who gets what, when, where, and how. So the all the nations wants to control the supply chain of radioactive materials. Like I said, nuclear fuel is a very precious commodity, and all the nations want to contain its supply chain so that they can maintain their power. And also the immense wealth associated with oil generates political struggle. So if you remember from chapter 1 Cold War that no chapter 3 sorry US hegemony, that Iraq started doing side no Kuwait started doing side drilling in Iraq oil fields because they wanted to steal that oil and use them to generate profit. So again, these kind of issues lead to conflict. Water is another crucial resource that is relevant to global politics, particularly in the 21st century, because water is becoming a scarce resource. So countries are still having issues like Pakistan and India. We keep having issues with the Indus River Treaty. India and Bangladesh also have some issues based on river water sharing. So again, and there is a growing possibility of disagreements over shared water resource because in 21st century the water resource will deplete, and now the states have started to use force to protect or seize fresh water resources. So again, that is a potential problem that we see. Now the last topic which we are going to discuss is the indigenous people and their rights. So first is how we define indigenous people. So the UN, United Nations, it defines indigenous populations as comprising the descendants of people who inhabited the present territory of a country at the time when persons of a different culture or ethnic origin arrived there from other parts of the world and overcame them. So like there were some people already living in an area, and then some other people from other area came and then overpowered these people and captured this area. So the original people who are living there will be called the indigenous population. So this is something that happened in America. So in America, you have the native Indians, the red Indians, and all those tribes were there, the native Indians. And then the European people came from Europe and they overcame these people. They massacred them. They took away their lands and everything. They took away all their resources. So these native Indian population will be called the indigenous population of USA, for example. Now, the indigenous voices in world politics called for the uh, admission of indigenous people to the world community as equals. So, the indigenous voices they want that indigenous people should be accepted as equals in the discussions of world geopolitics of resources, and we should listen to their opinions, and we also should cater for their needs. So they appeal to the governments to come to terms with the continuing existence of indigenous nations as enduring communities with an identity of their own. So these communities don't want to get intermixed with the general population. They want to maintain their own culture and their traditions, and that is why they appeal to the government that they should let these communities live in peace in their own areas, in their own native place, and we should not disturb them. So this is something that came up recently during the Citizenship Amendment Bill, that the Assamese people were scared that this CAB will disrupt their indigenous identity. So again, that is an issue. Last is that the worldviews of indigenous societies is that irrespective of their geographical location are strikingly similar to respect to land and the variety of life supported by it. So the indigenous people want an alternate model of development. They want nature to coexist with humans. They don't want humans to exploit nature for their benefit, but to coexist with nature. So this is the indigenous people and their rights. With this, we will finish this chapter. In the next video, I will start the next chapter, that is globalization. Thank you.